Welcome back to another one of my vlog entries. Time to talk about the tile map editor. It's coming along, nearly done. There's still a few things missing, mainly the actual painting of the tiles and the save and load button. Everything else works already. We have menuing going on. That is a new addition to the framework. We can load a tile set. We have meaningful error messages. So the tile set needs to be fully tiled by the tiles. We can input a name. And then currently it's set up that it just picks the first tile and tiles the entire area with it. So if we add another layer, I'm just gonna use the same image, but we're gonna tile it differently. Tile names are not allowed to conflict. We can see that it now picked the first 4 tiles and tiled them together. We can give our layers names. If we want to. We can also switch between layers. We can see that here, I don't know if that shows up in the recording, but we can see that the tile set itself, the tiles, the tiling changes. And if we remove our top layer, then we go back to the bottom one. So that works correctly, all of this. Like I said, save load is still missing. And of course, we can reuse tile sets that we have already loaded before, so that you don't have to configure it every time. We also are still missing settings for the tile map itself, so that we can define its size and possibly also the shape. So a tile doesn't have to be the same size, and currently it's hard-coded to 32 by 32 pixels, not bits. And that is probably something we want also to be configurable. And zooming and panning. So this is already in a scroll box, the same as this one. So it can scroll if it's small enough. So if we make the tile map large enough, as it grows, we will be able to also scroll, but there is no, let's say, middle mouse button panning or something actions defined. And a brush is missing. So currently it's not possible to select a tile here and then start painting in the map with it, or selecting a set of tiles. As well as a clear function of like clearing an entire layer or just clearing like a delete brush. Yeah. I learned a lot about how I do and do not, more importantly, want to use my UI framework. What's painful about it. I refactored half the entire world to make it work, but the base idea works, and it works surprisingly well. Maybe I shouldn't say surprisingly well. If we turn out debug overlays, then we can see the layouting work that's happening in the background a bit better. If I can give one suggestion, if you're gonna write your own framework for UI, absolutely implement a feature that shows you layouting decisions like this. And another thing that may make sense is to also show hitboxes in the interactable tiles. I don't have that feature, but I'm thinking about adding that as a debug thing, though not as boxes, maybe as checkerboards, or I don't know yet. Some different way. But one thing that is very painful is how verbose everything is. I already am using macros to shorten things. For example, centering with the anchor one is already a macro because it's just annoying to always type this out. Another thing that's annoying is that we have to pass the world around. The world is just an ID generator. Since every element needs its unique ID and they're currently constructing it themselves, using some sort of builder that calls their... So there are multiple ways of solving this. I'm currently thinking about having a building object builder thingy manager that contains the world itself and some other context, and you build the element through them using generics. And one thing that is doable is by... Where's my UI? Where's my UI? The element here. Element. So we could expand our element implementation here with a function that is the constructor. And then all we can, and then we can create an object that accepts a trait. So I'm not going to do that now, but so we could have a manager of some sort. Contains the word. And then we could do impl manager, fn new yada yada, but something like build UI element e, and e is an element of some sort. And that makes it not dinnable, because we can't have a dynamic vtable if we do that. But we can extend it through another trait, something like buildable element, which does not to be din. So if we had a trait buildable element, which is also an element, and this could have a pub fn new. We don't need a pub in here. Instead, if we accept buildable element, we could then call buildable element new to create the thing and pass in the context, such as a world. That requires that they have a normalized constructor, which is another thing that's currently not a thing, but I've been normalizing more and more. It should be possible, because basically all they need is a function that maps to the parameters from a set state and the world. Though we can quickly look at one. Let's look at anchor, for example. We were there here earlier. New here. It just accepts a function that maps from the state to the anchor params. It accepts the world, and in the case of anchoring, because it's layouts or positions a different element, it also accepts a child. But we could pass the child through the parameters as well. That shouldn't be a problem. Which would mean that between render cycles, we could also choose to rearrange the contents and have the children more dynamic, which is something the Flexbox already does. If we look at the parameters of a Flexbox, it already accepts the Flex children as a part of the parameters, so it's constructor or factory. That is a flex child. That is not the right one. Already only accepts the params and world, and I would normalize everything to this. then I can do this without any issues. And I could do a few more things, because right now it's also sort of painful that every time you define a element, you have to always call and get the parameters. Am I not using them? I am not using them. That cannot be. Oh, because I'm only using them in drawing, yeah. Wouldn't need to, I can delete this here. But all of them have to call it this, and this is also sort of annoying. It's also a potential source of errors. So I could instead pass it as a parameter here, and if I have a manager, then they can call that function for me. That is not a problem. Because I can then also enforce that an element can always, since I know there is a enforced constructor, I can always have a function that gets these. Where was I? That gets the parameters. I was in the anchor. That gets these parameters from the manager itself, and that the manager stores the function. Could even store the parameter function technically, and then all the element would need to know is its own ID, and the element itself could then grab the manager or ask the manager, or the manager asks it for its ID and then supplies the things. I'm not sure if I want to go that far, but a normalized constructor might be a start. And that would still not solve when I want to chain them like this. The problem. But if I don't return the element itself, but instead of a builder that wraps around it, that could then continue to hold a reference to the manager until you finalize the UI. And honestly, this is one of the biggest pains to always supply it. Another thing is with the layout here, I have to always define the children first before I can even think about creating the flex params down here. And they need to be captured in this enclosure, because down here this would get called on every render cycle. You would recreate them. Instead, you want to capture them before here. It's also something to think about. Maybe to provide some sort of cache they can access. That params here, this function can access, so you can write into it. I don't know yet. I'll think about that. Anyway, that's the state. Sort of getting excited that it's getting close to being usable. And then I can start actually using it and implementing things. Probably not going to do any of this until I move on to the other application. For the tile editor, it's small enough that it doesn't matter, and it is a very valuable learning experience so far. See you around.